Hello, students, Mr. Young here. Welcome to Chapter 11, Lesson 2, Part 1. Breaking this sucker down into two. Today we're going to talk about sort of the early Roman government. Let's hit it up. There's a quiz at the end. Oh, and it's Current Event Thursday. Let's check it out. So, they say when in Rome, do as the Romans. Well, I know one Roman cultural staple that you will not want to follow. They had stratified social class. Kind of like the Indian caste system, but with only two classes. There were different classes of people, but for 7th grade, let's just call it two classes in ancient Rome. You had at the top the oldest families of Rome, the elites, if you will, sort of like the nobles of every other society. They were called the patricians. I think it's generally assumed that a lot of them had their roots back to the original Senate of Rome, so sort of the noble class, if you will. The patricians. Most Romans were the normal Joe Schmo class, though, called the plebeians, also called plebes for short. You kind of still hear these words every once in a while. A patrician face is a noble face, and if someone calls you a plebe, they're kind of calling you like a peasant or a commoner. It's generally not good to be called a plebe. But it's just normal Joe Schmo people. Kind of a snooty thing to say. So don't ever call anyone a plebe. They'll punch you in the face. The plebes, they were not poor. But they did have poor people. Because they were everyone that just wasn't a noble. So the middle class, the lower class, all of them. They were just the plebes. So the patricians, being that elite class, they held all the political power and a great deal of the wealth, and the plebes got sick of this eventually, and we're just going to see what kind of trouble this causes, how it ends up forming the Republic of Rome. There's your patricians. Plebes were on the right. So surprisingly, both patrician and plebeian men were full citizens with the right to vote. The plebes did lack certain rights, though, of which they were none too happy. For example, they could not hold public office or lead religious rituals. It was also illegal for a plebeian to marry a patrician. The conflict between these two classes over these issues would basically reshape the republic. Let's bump into Roman government. Roman government had three branches of government, even with checks and balances. So there's some similarities to what we have now in the United States, except there was no separation of powers. So you had some things that seemed wonky to us. For example, a judge leading the courts and leading an army. One branch made laws, another branch ran the daily affairs of the government. The third branch was the judges. The two leaders of the government were called consuls, so it's kind of like having two co-presidents. They were patrician men that ran the army as well as the government. They had the power to veto a decision made by the other consul. And they served only 1-year terms to prevent them from becoming too powerful. So they put in a lot of steps to make sure these consuls didn't get too much power. They could veto each other. They only served as 1 year, and I believe they could only be a consul. There was a 10-year break period between being a consul. So if you were a consul, you ended your consulship. You couldn't be a consul again for 10 more years. Let's see, they also had another high office called the praetors. They were the judges that could lead the army. That was a praetor. Imagine one of our Supreme Court judges leading an army. We've been attacked! Quick, send Ruth Bader Ginsburg! That's pretty funny. There she is. She's actually got a lot of sass in her sassy pants. But that's a position that was in Rome. That would be like a Supreme Court justice leading an army. Pretty crazy. History. It's fascinating. Now, the legislature of Rome consisted of 300 patrician senators that served for life. Initially, they were only advisors, but as time went on, the senators gained more power. Another legislative body was the Assembly of Centuries, which sounds super cool, right? But they were also patricians, patrician men. They elected the consuls and praetors, as well as passed laws. Let's bump on to the class conflict. By 495 BC, the plebes were pretty angry. They paid taxes and served in the army, but they didn't have a say in government. Not cool, man. They went on strike and threatened to leave and form their own government. Now, the plebes were 95% of the Roman population, so the patricians kind of had to listen to them. They allowed the plebes to have more, they have their own government body. They created a new, basically, assembly just for the plebeians called the Council of Plebes. The council elected tribunes that would take plebeian concerns to the government. Tribunes had the power to veto government decisions, so getting some real power here, plebeians. Now, in 287 BC, the plebes made massive gains in government when the Council of Plebes was given the right to make laws for all Romans, be they plebeian or patrician. Pretty big deal. Marriage between the classes even became legal. Plebes and patricians were now legally equal, but a lot of that power and wealth still maintained sort of status quo, staying in the hands of the patrician class. All right, let's talk about Cincinnatus and civic duty. Now, the Romans believed that in a time of crisis, democracy could be put on hold to deal with that crisis. One man called a dictator would take total control of the government to basically deal with the crisis in a very efficient manner. A dictator did not have the negative connotations that it does today. Now you think dictator, you think like Kim Jong-un or someone like that. But in Rome, it was sort of a hero. It was a person that you get, all right, you have all the power. Help fix this. After the crisis was ended, however, the dictator was expected to give up their power back to the republic. And when we talk about this, we have to talk about Cincinnatus. He was the most famous dictator of Rome. He was a consul. I guess he had retired, and he was plowing his fields when word reached him that there was a threat to Rome, and he had been appointed dictator by the Senate to deal with this problem. If memory serves, the Roman army was up north somewhere fighting someone, and they had got themselves in a pickle. And the Roman army was surrounded and about to be destroyed unless they were helped. So here comes Cincinnatus. He forms his own army. He drops his plow. He says, Cincinnatus, you've been appointed dictator. We need you to save the Roman army. So he grabs up a new army, and he marches out, defeats the threat, saves the other half of the Roman army, and he comes back, returns to Rome with his army, and promptly gives up his power and goes back to his fields. This has basically made him a hero, this selfless service and to Rome made him a hero. He practiced what's called civic duty, or a sense of responsibility to one's country. His example made him a role model for future leaders, such as George Washington, who we know goes on to lead the Continental Army in the Revolution here in the United States, and then he goes back plowing his fields until he becomes the first president. Yeah, we're still talking about Cincinnatus and his selfless service and his civic duty. All right, let's bust on down to Roman law. Roman law is perhaps Rome's most important contribution to the world. Initially, Roman law was not written down. The judges knew the law, and they would just interpret the law. They were the only ones that really knew it, though. The plebes did not like this and thought the judges would always just rule in favor of the patricians. In 451 BC, Rome adopted its first set of written laws. They were called the 12 Tables, and they were publicly displayed in the market for all to see. They were applied equally to both plebeians and patricians alike. This equal application to all, regardless of wealth or status, is called the rule of law, and it is a central tenet of the United States law today. Another main idea of Rome used today is the assumption of innocence until proven guilty. So, yeah, that all came from Rome. Here's the 12 tables, see? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There are 12 of them. That's why they're called the 12 tables. Now, we're going to stop here for today. We're going to talk about a series of wars of the Roman Republic called the Punic Wars. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. Go ahead and knock out the short assignment. Punic Wars, yeah, that's Hannibal and elephants and stuff like that. Pretty cool. Yeah, it's a good story. We'll learn about that tomorrow. For now, knock out these 2 questions. What are the difference between a plebeian and a patrician? All kinds of information on that. And what are some ideas of law that originated in Rome that we still use today? Oh, we just went over that too. All right, I hope you were paying attention. Go ahead, bump on to the current event after you knock this out, because it's Thursday. And next Thursday we should have the Teen Biz article. All right, that's it for today. Let me know if you have any questions. Have a glorious day.